This whole question of climate change happened as a consequence of the adding of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere and the heating, the warming of our climate. If you look at the records, the scientific records that we have, starting from the work using the Vostok ice cores onwards, you will find that usually what happens in the climate change phenomenon is that temperature goes up first and carbon dioxide follows. Now, the common understanding now is that carbon dioxide goes up and temperature follows. No, temperature goes up first and carbon dioxide follows. In our case, the Industrial Revolution happened, and of course carbon dioxide took a foremost place. But what is the trigger to climate change? About 500 years ago or 600 years ago, before the Industrial Revolution, was a time of colonial expansion through the planet. During these few hundred years, we effectively removed most of the forests of the planet. For timber, for making of the ships, for wars, etc., and for the large agriculture that the colonial adventure required. If you look at what was lost in terms of our forests, and if you consider that every single tree, every single large tree, produces an evaporative cooling factor that is equivalent to about 2 or 3 room-size air conditioners running day and night, you can then understand the amount of evaporative cooling that was removed from the planet. Added to this, there was the burning of the forest, and all that carbon dioxide of those forests went into the atmosphere. Something else happened. These forests produce something that is also critical for our existence. They are called CCN, cloud condensation nuclei. Clouds are produced primarily by material from living organisms. There is moisture in the air. There are streams, rivers of moisture in our atmosphere that we cannot see. They only condense when there is a nucleus for the water to condense around. Over the ocean, the cloud condensation nuclei is created by DMS, dimethyl sulfide, produced by phytoplankton. On the land, cloud condensation nuclei are produced by bacterial and bacterial particles from pseudomonads and from aerogenies. These bacteria and bacterial particles live in the pores, in the stomata of trees and plants, of all plants. And they, when they evapotranspire, send this into the air, and that becomes the cloud condensation nuclei. And with the removal of the forest during the colonial adventure, before the industrial adventure, we removed all these 3 aspects of cooling for the planet. Now, that was the trigger that started the heating. Then came the Industrial Revolution, the burning of fossil fuels, and the addition of fossil carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This is how the process began. We must understand this first. Next, we must understand that fossil carbon never belongs in the atmosphere. Why? Because through these millions of years, there has been huge injections of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere from volcanoes, etc. But the atmosphere always remained stable. How? Why? This is because nature, the plants, absorbed this, tied it up, and then it was decanted slowly into the fossil record, into the rocks. It was taken away from the atmosphere and put away, never to come into contact with life again. Exactly. And this was maintaining the atmosphere that people, human beings, life could exist on. This is a process of life. The fossil fuel was the way that life put away the poison and put it into the rocks. It never belonged in the atmosphere. Today what we are doing is we are drilling into that, we are pulling this fossil out and we are burning it. Then we say, don't worry, let's plant a tree. That will absorb the carbon dioxide. Two things here. First, if you are going to plant trees for absorbing carbon dioxide, then we should be replacing the forest that we lost in the colonial adventure. The moment we do that, there's no more space for planting any more trees on the planet. Right. Second factor, if you plant a tree to absorb fossil carbon that doesn't belong in the atmosphere, that tree will live for 30 years, 40 years, 100 years and die. Once that dies, that carbon dioxide goes back again to join the atmosphere. So all you've done is just done something which is merely a bit of window dressing, if you want to call it, right? Tied this carbon up for 100 years and say, it's all right. Carbon trading. Now, as I said before, the whole question about planting trees becomes a little absurd when you consider the past. We have to replace the trees that we've cut down. But then again, in terms of fossil, if you put fossil carbon into a tree and the tree absorbs it, it will hold it for 30, 40, 50, 100 years. And when the tree dies, that carbon goes back into the atmosphere. So you've never done anything except tie that bit for 50 or 100 years. It's not going to save us from climate change. The other factor about carbon trading is when done in this manner, when done in a manner that does not recognize biotic and fossil carbon, it is tantamount to carbon laundering. It's just like money laundering. Because consider, the carbon in the biotic system is held in trees, etc., corals, etc., at the maximum, say, 2,000, 3,000 years. The carbon in the fossil has been held for 20 million years. There is no comparison. If you pay $5 for putting a ton of carbon that from a lost forest, you should be paying at least $500,000 if you're putting down a ton of material from fossil energy. But that's not what's happening. They too want to pay that $5 and get away with it. That's carbon laundering. That's all it is. It's cheating. It is a fraud. It's a cheat. And the world is going with it. It's ridiculous. It's fundamental science. Any high school child will tell you the difference. And some people will say, oh, what's the difference in carbon? Is there a difference? Obviously, this one has been there for 20 million years. But then again, look at it another way. I take a diamond, it's carbon. I take a piece of coal, it's carbon. I take a piece of wood, it's carbon. I take an apple, it's carbon. Do they all have the same value? No. Then why must carbon from fossil have the same value as the carbon from biotic? It's a cheat. It's a total fraud. And why the IPCC hasn't addressed this horrifies me. We have to. If we want to do anything about climate change, we have to address this fundamentally, squarely on. Fossil carbon has no place in the atmosphere of living organisms. One is very difficult and very painful, and that is putting the right price on fossil. Fossil is enjoying a huge subsidy just because the oil companies and the coal companies want to make their millions. They must pay a tax proportionate to the damage they are doing. Of course, it will be more expensive for us to drive a car. I mean, we may not be able to drive cars. But do we want to live? Do we want our children to live a healthy life? Or do we want to drive cars for 10 years? That's our choice. But this is what we have to do. Absolutely. Biotic carbon is, because it is this biotic carbon that supports life. Now, let me give you a very, very fundamental example. The most important thing on this planet for us, first, is oxygen. We got to breathe oxygen. There is only one thing that gives oxygen onto the planet: photosynthetic biomass. What do I mean? Photosynthetic biomass is the green stuff, the leaves of trees, the algae in oceans. That is photosynthetic biomass. That is the only substance that can give us oxygen. Next, the leaves and photosynthetic biomass is the only substance that can change carbon dioxide into carbohydrates that we can eat and we can live on. Thirdly, it is this photosynthetic biomass that makes it possible for the circulation of water. As I said earlier, when it comes to evapotranspiration, it is this photosynthetic biomass. But up till now, we have not placed a dollars or pennies worth of value on photosynthetic biomass. We have placed value on timber. We say, okay, we've got to fix carbon, so we've got to make trees, and the trees will fix the carbon. But what really does fix the carbon? It's not the wood, it's the leaves. But those engines, that engine we don't recognize. We recognize only the product of it. So therefore, one of the ways that we can change this planet is to place value on photosynthetic biomass. If we do that, then farmers, people all over the world would be paid for enhancing the life support system of the planet and answering to the needs of climate change. That is how we can make a change and harness humanity to move towards this change. Something else that's important in photosynthetic biomass is, if we place value on photosynthetic biomass, we create capital, huge photosynthetic capital, which retains value only as long as it is living. You take a leaf and you pluck it from a tree, no value. It's living, it has value. Up to now we have placed value on things that are dead, whether it be a fruit or timber or whatever we take. Now what I would propose is that we place value on life. Give life a value and give the life support system a value, and let us as humanity respond to this. And then I believe that we can change the way this planet is moving towards, and I would then say, step back from the very, shall we say, very dismal future that Lovelock painted for us. Okay. Yes, we can. We saw what we did with carbon. We saw what we did with biodiversity. When the world was interested enough in it, we made the conventions, we made the instruments, there's money flowing, there's markets happening. All we have to do is have these terms, the value of photosynthetic biomass, a part of the lexicon of the United Nations, and let us put a value on it. In my research at the moment, given current prices of carbon, I put a value of $1.34 per kilogram of photosynthetic biomass. Now, we could accept that or less, it doesn't matter. But the moment we do that, we have created an economic and social movement towards a total change on this planet.